Welcome to DevJams. This is where we talk with developers who are doing interesting, inspiring, innovative things when it comes to images and videos inside of their projects. And many of the times they're using Cloudinary for that image and video management and delivery. My name is Sam Brace, and I am the Senior Director of Customer Education and Community at Cloudinary. And in today's episode, we are talking with Ben Davis. He is a developer that has developed a really cool e-commerce site that's using Svelte, specifically our Svelte SDK that was developed by our Cloudinary community. But also there's lots of other great technology that's woven in through the overall project, such as Stripe. A lot of things were done with TypeScript. There's also in some new technology that we've seen with using ORMs like Drizzle. There's a lot of things that are really exciting that are going to be part of this overall introspective look at the work that Ben has done for his e-commerce business, SedimentArt. Joining me for this episode, as well as luckily every episode of DevJams, is Jen Brisman, who is a technical curriculum engineer at Cloudinary. Jen, we are so happy to have you here for this episode.
Hey, happy to be here as always.
Tell me, why are you excited to talk to Ben today?
Yeah, in addition to everything you just mentioned, we're going to touch a lot of different technologies today with Ben. But I'm really excited to talk about shadcn and design in general. And basically Ben will talk more about it, but it just seems like it's this component library marketplace where you can kind of decide how you want your apps to look. And it's great for people who are stronger in the back end and don't want to deal with design if they want to make their stuff look really, really clean and sharp. So I'm just excited to get into Ben's use case. It seems like a really typical Cloudinary use case where someone has an e-commerce site, they want to scale it, but it's not like a huge company like a Nike or something like that. So really excited to talk to Ben today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it is worth pointing out as I share my screen here that you'll see that everything we're going to be talking about is, of course, open source, luckily, that we can be able to tie it to. So this is going to be tied to Ben's GitHub repository. So you can easily access that at bmdavis419 and then /SvelteKit-e-commerce. Everything we're going to be covering is going to be inside of there. And before we bring Ben on, of course, it's worth mentioning that this is not the first DevJams podcast that we have done for Cloudinary. We have multiple years of content with amazing developers, people that are putting out the projects that we love to highlight, uses of innovative images, videos, and making sure that those are coming out in the best ways when it comes to being able to really, really push the boundaries of what's possible inside of their websites or mobile apps and other interesting software projects. You can always check those out at cloudinary.com/podcasts. And also you can keep talking with community members like Ben and others that are using Cloudinary, always at our Cloudinary community, which is going to be at community.cloudinary.com. So with that said, let's bring on our friend Ben here to have a little bit of a discussion about this amazing site that he has built. So Ben, welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about the path you've taken to get to where you are today as a developer, as just Ben.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, I'm Ben. I run a pretty small YouTube channel going over a bunch of back-end and front-end computer science and web development topics. I am currently a CSE student part-time at Ohio State. I also worked last year as a back-end engineer at an app agency, and I've been doing programming and building stuff for about 6 years now, working on juggling a bunch of different projects. I've got SedimentArt, I've got Insider Viz, I've got Block, really just kind of making a bunch of things and making videos about it.
So what got you excited about being tied to software development? And obviously you've got your hands in a lot of different parts of this, but what started you on that journey?
Yeah, so back in high school, my junior year, I wasn't entirely certain exactly what I wanted to do. But my high school had this really great program where I could go to another high school and take some career tech classes in computer science. So I was able to actually take some college level CSE classes in high school. And there we got into, I wrote a bunch of Visual Basic, and I actually was able to make some like really basic, they weren't good, but some like PHP sites. And I kind of got into it at that point. And, my friends and I, we really enjoyed it. And we're like, hey, we should do more of this. So we spent a bunch of time, and over the years, we've made more websites. We tried to do mobile games, and it's really just become a passion of ours to just build really cool stuff and try and make a business out of it.
That's incredible. And so, and I'm assuming that this group of friends that you have are this is this the same group that's tied to the project we're talking about today, the SedimentArt project?
Yes. Yeah, no, the group of guys, we've been working together for years now. I live with them. We built Insider Viz, and they also helped out building SedimentArt. You'll see a lot of the beautiful, like, visual front end stuff that was done there. That was actually them. They are very, very talented front end developers, which is great to have to work with.
Oh, that's absolutely incredible. And I love the fact that you have such a close knit group of people that you can tie to
Yeah,
software development projects. Like,
it's the
it's one of
best.
those things where, I mean, many times when I was working on projects, you're kind of doing it by yourself because your friends just don't aren't into the same things you are. So
Mhm.
it's very cool that you've been able to find a like-minded group of people. That's very, very cool. What I want to ask you about, so now that we're starting to understand you as a person and understand
Mhm.
your path in development, tell me about SedimentArt. Tell me about this project that you decided to go and work on.
Yeah, so SedimentArt is actually it's kind of a funny story. Last fall I was home hanging out with some family, and my uncle had this idea. In the past we've come up with like random stuff and wanted to do things. And he is a very, very talented photographer, and he has all of these different art pieces that he's done. Everything you'll see on the site, these are like natural, these are these little tiny rocks, which he's done a bunch of really cool, fancy photography stuff with to get these beautiful images out of it. He showed me a bunch of these, and he's like, yeah, I'm trying kind of thinking I want to make like an e-commerce site for these, try and figure out a way to print them and sell them and do all this stuff. And I'm like, hey, this would be a great opportunity for me to make this because this is the kind of thing we know how to do and I'm pretty good at. And at the same time, I was looking for some good content ideas for YouTube. And I'm like, hey, this would be a really great opportunity to make a really cool e-commerce site, fully open source it, make a bunch of videos going over how all this stuff works. And that's sort of how it came to be. Initially, the scope on this was it was pretty small. We were initially just thinking, oh, we're going to make a really basic site here, make a couple pages and call it good. But over the sort of months that went by, this got to be a much more ambitious project. And you can see if you look at the actual site, we spent a lot of time on the front end and really trying to make this something special. And I'm very, very happy with how it turned out.
So as you were starting to come through this project and starting to say, okay, this is something that we're going to be building out, how did you start to come up with your stack?
Yeah, so this has been something for anyone who's watched my channel. You'll know that I go through and I switch technologies a lot. I am very much on the younger side of things. I have been programming for like 5 or 6 years now, but I'm still in college. I'm 21. I'm very much learning all the time. So my tech stacks change all the time. And I was doing a bunch of stuff with Golang earlier this year. And I'm going to go back and do some more stuff with that soon. But I've really been enjoying SvelteKit, and I've loved how it works. I really like the full stack experience we can get with these full stack JS frameworks, the end-to-end type safety, the built-in server, the easy deployments, the beautiful ORMs we now have access to. I really wanted to put something real in production for this because some of the other projects I'm working on, we're going to be rebuilding them in SvelteKit, and we're doing that right now. So I wanted to really put this to the test and try it. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to leverage SvelteKit, use these great technologies, and try and get the best developer experience possible. Put Drizzle, SvelteKit, PlanetScale, all these things together to create this, and it ended up being really, really good. I'm very happy how it turned out.
Yeah, well, we're pretty happy with it too. I think it's a pretty great example of how you
Mhm.
can combine lots of things together. So absolutely that makes sense. And as you can see on the screen that I am showing here, probably one of the ways that you're able to connect Svelte and all of the work that you want to do with it with Cloudinary were some of the details that we're showing here, the community SDK that we have. And you can see that housed at svelte.cloudinary.dev. But was that, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but was that one of the reasons that you decided to use Cloudinary for this project because of the ability to use Svelte and Cloudinary together via the SDK?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was 100% a factor. One of the other factors was just at my app agency job, which I worked last year. In a lot of the projects we did there, I had just already used Cloudinary. So I was pretty familiar with it. I tried to do images custom before, had not really had a great experience. And Cloudinary was, of all the tools I'd use, it was the best tool I'd use. So I figured, hey, let's use this here. And around the time I was planning out the stack, I found the new Cloudinary SDK and I'm like, yeah, this is perfect. And you will talk about the code later, but it's worked out really well.
Very, very cool. One thing I want to ask you about, because this is something that we haven't had a ton of DevJams conversations about, but the incorporation of Drizzle into the project, from what I
Mhm.
understand, of course, this is a way to bring in database types of management into this project. Talk to me more about the reasoning for it, of course, how it's used on your site.
Yeah, of course. So Drizzle is, for those who aren't familiar with all this, Drizzle is an ORM. It's a way for us to communicate with our database. For the backend solution here, I am using PlanetScale for my database, and I'm using Drizzle to connect to that and get my data out. The way SvelteKit works, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is we have all of our different pages like you would in a normal web app, but attached to each of those pages, we can have a little loader function. In that loader function, I can use Drizzle to communicate with my database since the loader functions run server side. So what I can do is I can fetch my data out of the database. Drizzle is fully built into TypeScript. So I get all my types right there. So I know exactly what I'm dealing with. I can send that data down to my actual page. And then on my page, I get all of those types which Drizzle gave me. So it gives me this really great experience of full stack type safety in my ORM and in my front end project, which is a really great experience.
That's awesome. That's really, really awesome. And it's good for people to know about these various types of tools. And
Mhm.
one thing that we've definitely seen a lot of is using Supabase with various projects with Cloudinary as well. So it's nice to see that like this is something that can basically connect to any type of database that you have out there. You're using PlanetScale, of course, for this, but knowing that you can see this nice list that it can connect to pretty much what you can think of. So excellent tool that you're going to be able to highlight here in this case. So now that we've kind of covered some details about the project, understanding why you built Sentiment, why you've chosen some of the details for your stack, I think this is a good chance for us to walk through it. Do you want to pop over your screen and take a look at this with us today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think what I want to sort of start with, the easiest way to do this will be I want to actually show you guys how products are created on this site because, like we were talking about earlier, we have this backing database of PlanetScale, and we need to store our images and we need to also store all of our products. When you go to this collections page here, all of these are stored within our database, and we need to put those in there somehow, and we do that through the admin page. So the first thing I want to sort of highlight here is going to be the way we upload images. You go onto this page and you hit upload. We're able to use the Cloudinary uploader, and we're doing that with the Cloudinary upload button. We talked about earlier the Cloudinary SDK. This is one of the components which they expose for you. It's super easy to set up. All I had to do was just give it an upload preset and then pass in this on upload function so that whenever we go ahead and upload images, it will run this function, which is really simple. All it's doing, whoops, that's not the one I wanted. That's what I wanted. Sorry. Whenever you go through and run it, it will fire this handle submit function, which is really just going to our backend here, and it's going to save the image to our database, which makes it super easy to upload images. When I was putting the content into the site, I used the Google Drive endpoint here to go ahead and connect to my drive and mass import all these pictures at once because it would have been such a pain to go through and manually insert each and every one of these. This made it easy to just bulk upload with this handle submit.
This is incredible. And I mean, this is what I love about it is it's simple, it's easy. As you said, it was exposed to the SDK, a lot of these things that are there, and it makes it where, in my opinion, it's not hard to be able to add this into your code.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's really nice, as we talked about earlier, Drizzle and the full stack experience here, is this whole project is built both front end and back end in SvelteKit. So this fetch that I'm running down here is really just a form action in SvelteKit. It's just basically a post request. On my page.server here, I expose all these different actions, and my my create method right here is what we're calling there. And it's super simple to save these images to the database. I can just go ahead down here. We've already got our Cloudinary ID, our width and our height, which we grab down here from the actual Cloudinary uploader SDK. And then within our page.server here, all we have to do is just run a db.insert, and that's it. All of this stuff can happen in one code base, fully type safe, without having to go to some external directory or whatever. It's a really great experience.
Very, very cool. I like this a lot. And what's also nice about this is then you're determining the width and height in very clear ways. Like you understand like where's the single source of truth and where it's being set, how it's being spread across the database. So this is really, really nice.
In terms of the width and height, are you making it bigger and then scaling it down to make sure that it works on all devices? Or how are you
Yes.
handling the width and height?
That's a big thing that we sort of realized early on is when I was developing the site, initially I would be sending down images at like the actual resolution size that I wanted. So a great example here on this page is I am on, obviously you can't see it, but I'm on a big 4K monitor here, but I have it scaled down to 1080p. So when I would put in an image in 1080p resolution here, it would get kind of fuzzy. So what I had to do is I send down the image at a larger size, and then that's able to make the image look super crisp on all different displays. The code for this, actually, a great example of this would be on the product page. So on our actual like product images page here, we wanted to send these down at a much larger size to ensure that whenever they show up on the screen, they get that really crisp looking feel. And we do the same thing on mobile here. So on mobile, even though this would only be like a probably 600 pixel image, we wanted to send it down a little bigger to make sure that on these high resolution displays, it looks super crisp.
So
When
great.
one thing I'm seeing here in the code example that you have here is that
Mhm.
I noticed right away when you went from desktop to mobile that the actual product stayed centered on the screen. And I think that's because you're using Giotto in here.
Yes.
So where are you applying that?
Yeah. So the actual place, let me double check here. Um, on the yeah. So all we're doing here is we're just doing object fit cover, and I
Okay.
believe the Cloudinary SDK under the hood is actually applying that for me.
Oh my
So
gosh.
what we're doing
I didn't
here
know
is
that. That's great.
I definitely double check and fact check like that.
Okay.
I'm not 100% certain, but I'm 99% sure it does because what we do this for all of them is we just set the object fit to cover. And then we can talk about too here. This is how we're actually printing out our images. It's not some big complicated thing. We're just able to use the SDK. They give us this component. We pass in our source, which is the Cloudinary ID. If you remember back on the admin page on our success and handle upload function, we would get that public ID from Cloudinary. We just pass that ID into this Cloudinary image component here, give it a width and a height, tell it to cover. So we want to make sure that we center our image and cover the whole thing. And it will just do a great job just giving us the images right, just like this.
That's incredible. That's
Mhm.
absolutely incredible. And what's nice about what you're showing here is that it seems like it's baking in a lot of the great things that Cloudinary is doing, but you're not having to bake it in yourself. So, like as an example, we're applying an auto format that I can see here right away. So that
Mhm.
way it's going to display it at like a WebP or an AVIF or something that's going to be optimal for a user's browser. I can see that's adding a certain level of compression or auto quality that's going to be there. And then to our point, in certain cases, it looks like it's actually applying Giotto. So that way the product is actually being kept as the center of the crop when you move to a mobile screenshot. So this is
Yes.
cool. This is
Mhm.
really, really cool. And what's neat about it, as you're pointing out, it's simple way that you've been able to add it in. You haven't had to do a lot of work to be able to add all of these transformations. That's kind of the neat power of one of these community SDKs, like the ones that we were seeing from the Svelte community that's there. So that's cool.
Yeah, and if you go back to the web version, I also noticed that there must be something else happening behind the scenes with when you set the dimensions to 1,000 by 1,000. I know that this isn't a perfect square, so there must be
Mhm.
something. It's probably taking the width and making that 1,000, and then keeping the aspect ratio to make sure that the height matches that. So that's probably less than 1,000, but something must be happening under the hood to make that happen, so the images aren't skewed.
Yes, 100%.
That's so great. Yes, I think Sam and I are learning
Yes.
about the Svelte SDK in real time. This is
Mhm.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's like we spent time with it, but it's like it's one of the
Yeah.
coolest things about the community SDKs is that they're always adding things to them. So it's like,
Yes.
oh, that's there now. That's kind of cool. Um, so you've talked about a few of the parts of how we've touched Cloudinary in here. Is there other parts that you're using Cloudinary for inside of your project before we move on to some of the other topics that I might be missing?
Yeah, one of and this is a really kind of simple thing which you'd probably overlook, but one of the nicest things that they put into the Cloudinary SDK is this CLD OG image component,
Mm.
which what it does is I can pass in a source. This source is just the public ID of my image. You can grab that from your Cloudinary dashboard. You pass in an alt text and you can pass in an actual like Twitter title here. And what this will do is this will set up all the SEO stuff you need so that when you like put a link to this on Twitter, it'll show up correctly. Vercel has a really good, they pulled up real quick. Uh, if you go on the Vercel dashboard, they have a really great feature here where you can see like what your site will look like if it's embedded into like Twitter or Slack or Facebook or whatever. So you can see we get this nice image, we get the nice description, we get the nice Twitter title. all that's coming from that Cloudinary OG Image component, which is such a huge help to get the SEO right for these pages.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, and I'm glad you said Slack, because that's the one thing that's interesting, is that because a lot of times people think about Open Graph in terms of social media, like you mentioned, like Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, making sure that there's a very clear tag that's going to be on there, but also image that's associated with it. But then also you have these things like the way that I think they call it for Slack, they call them micro browsers, or basically things that have web-based elements to them. So when you post on Slack or Discord as examples too, that's going to ensure that a lot of this also comes through the right way. So absolutely, I'm glad you're thinking about Open Graph. I wish more developers thought about Open Graph, frankly. And also great plug for what Vercel is doing here, because I think what they're doing to be able to make sure that Open Graph is thought about is very, very smart, especially if you're deploying and doing like Vercel anyway.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's also 100% true that everything you are doing, as you've seen, is being deployed through Vercel. I'd love to know that. Like, what was the reasoning to choose Vercel, like over maybe something else, like a Netlify or a Heroku or something like that?
Yeah, well, what's nice about this sort of way we're building this is, like I said, we're doing it's full stack JS. So the entire project, both front end and back end, client and server, is being run through this one SvelteKit project. And ultimately, I just went with Vercel because it was the quickest and easiest way to do it. They have great support built in for all of the major JS meta frameworks. And when you're doing these sort of full stack deployment things, it works really well. I've also looked at some other different ways of deploying it, and I need to spend more time with these myself. I've looked at like SST as another way to do it, to deploy it directly to AWS. You can also, what's great about SvelteKit is you can pick how you want to actually build and deploy this. Within your svelte.config, they have tons of different adapters that you can use. So if you want to export this just as a node, like as a node app or whatever, and then run that in a little Docker container and throw that up on Railway or Heroku or whatever, that will work just fine. And in this case, I just decided to go with Vercel.
I like it. It's actually a great reason for it. And actually, I want to touch upon something that Jen, you mentioned earlier. So shadcn, also huge guy when it comes to the Twitter presence, and he does a lot of the UI stuff for Vercel, because it's my connection to that. You're using his component library for a lot of the UI that you have there. How is that being used?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me pull up what I think is probably one of the best examples of this, and that's going to be our login page here.
Okay.
The reason I went with a component library in general is just because I am not the most talented front end developer in the world. I have never been great at coming up with UIs off the top of my head. I can do it, but they're usually not too particularly great. But what I really like about using something like shadcn is not that it takes over and does all of the UI for me. It doesn't. If you look here at this login page here, it didn't give me this whole login page. What it did give me was the building blocks to make it. So if we look over on the actual login page here, and I'm utilizing the layout system here for some fancy stuff, but the important part here is this card right here is what's being printed out over here. And shadcn gives me these buttons, it gives me the card itself, and it just kind of lets you take these, like, it's almost like you get like Lego bricks type thing, if that's a good analogy, that you can just socket together however you want to make the website look good. So instead of having to come up with the buttons yourself, you just use their already built really good button, slot them in, and it works pretty well.
I gotta tell you, Vercel's designs in general, I mean, for what that company is, they're so nice. And you can tell this is shadcn taking a lot of what he's done and applying this across the board.
Yeah.
Make this completely open source. I mean, you can see this is a gorgeous component library. So definitely, if I were you, I would have done the exact same thing. So excellent on that point.
Well, and what's even nice about it too is it's very customizable, and it's not like you're locking your entire site into like, okay, we have to do all of this with shadcn, because you can see here, like our buttons and stuff, we're utilizing it a lot, but you can get really custom with this. If you look at our our mobile product page here, these are not shadcn components. We custom built these, but we were able to use some shadcn pieces to enhance this. So when you hit this like add to cart button here, this pop-up is a customized shadcn component. So it's very extendable, very customizable, not super opinionated, which I really like. I don't like it when you have to deal with some like styling framework which will take over everything. It's nice to just have these little building blocks which you can make your own stuff off of.
Yes. Yeah. We don't need to name names, but I know exactly. I've been
Yes.
in component libraries like that in the past too myself. So excellent. Excellent. So, okay. So we talked about a lot of the components so far. One of the things that is also amazing, of course, is that Stripe is your e-commerce layer for a lot of these things. How did you weave in Stripe? Was there any roadblocks that you found with it? Is there any connection between the images and Stripe? I'd love to know everything about that.
Yeah, so I got to say, one of probably the easiest parts of this actually ended up being Stripe itself. I can show you here on the test one. These are all like fake. This is the local instance. This isn't the production. So I have like fake prices and stuff in here. And I just use this one as a demo. I marked it with an insane price, so I know it's linked into my Stripe instance. But actually getting Stripe to work here is very simple. There are really only two pieces you need to get it working in this e-commerce site, since we're using the Stripe checkout library here. And that is the actual checkout creation and then the actual webhook to fulfill it. So if you see right here, like again, we're using all fake products here on the test mode version, but all you have to do is you go into your on the cart page. I have this page.server. So remember, we have both client and server here in the SvelteKit app. For my action here, whenever we submit on the cart page, all we're going to do here is we're just going to create a new Stripe checkout session. I won't go through the nitty gritty on it. We're just going to pass in all of our different products, which we've saved. We have to create those products in Stripe as well. So all of our products in the database within our schema here, the actual product sizes, which are the things that we're putting into our cart, I save the Stripe product ID right here. And since we've saved that Stripe product ID, I can just take whatever the users put in their cart. I can send that over to Stripe, create that checkout session, and then it works right here. And when the time comes to actually fulfill the order, it's super trivial to just go ahead and spin up my API/Stripe/server. And in here, I can fulfill all my events via webhooks. So whenever someone checks out, they will send an event back to our server. It'll say, hey, we had a successful checkout. We'll say there was a checkout session completed. And then I can go ahead, run a bunch of logic, save the customer into the database, save the order into the database, and fulfill it that way. So it's a really simple way to handle checkout custom, which I love.
Yeah. This is really, really slick. This is really, really slick. And I like the fact, I mean, nothing against anything that I'm going to say here, but I like the fact that you did this completely from scratch. You did this with various technologies that you want to do. You built this stack, you customized this to what it is. It's not like you went into like, let's say like, because you could have easily said, well, I'll just build you a Shopify site for what your team needed. But you decided to do this as a learning project. You decided to do this as a way to really start to understand some of these libraries, some of these components in a deeper way. So this is great. Jen, what are you thinking here?
Yeah, I was just wondering, why did you decide to kind of build this from scratch and not use a Shopify or something that already is fully baked for you?
Well, this is an interesting question, because I think this gets into a lot of like more product discussion than even just development, where in this case, a lot of my motivation for building this entirely custom was for the purpose of, hey, I wanted to make a cool open source project. I wanted to make videos about it. And I just like building stuff and I enjoy it. If the only thing we were worried about was just getting a store up and running and shipping out our product instantly, yeah, Shopify would probably be a better way to do that quicker. But I do think that we ended up getting a lot of benefit from doing it custom, because obviously the floor of what you can do custom is you can make it a lot worse than Shopify. But I think some of the things we made here are better than Shopify.
Yeah.
I think there are, I don't think that there are a lot of Shopify templates that can get quite as nice and nitty gritty and custom as these. Even just super subtle things. Like if you go onto some of these product pages, we have custom gradients for each product. So every single product page has a slightly different gradient, which kind of matches the actual product. And that's the kind of thing we're able to do by doing this custom. And, we're all engineers. We like building stuff, and I just wanted to build stuff.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah. I mean, were there any roadblocks? Like, let's just say I think about an Etsy or a Shopify, and I'm thinking that they probably have the final step, the shipping or the asking for a review or those steps. Did you have a process for that or anything that you wanted to make sure to do? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so the getting the shipping handled was actually pretty easy, because Stripe can handle that for us. I don't want to pull up the actual Stripe dashboard because I don't have everything set up
Mhm.
correctly. It's all my production stuff. But what we're able to do in there is anytime a user places an order, we're able to collect a shipping address from them. Within our checkout session here, if I go back to it, you'll see that the actual user has to put in their shipping address. So we're able to get that. And then for the actual fulfillment, this is a very small scale, just custom, we're just kind of figuring this out on our own. So
Yeah.
we're just manually handling the shipping. We just get a list of these orders on our back end, and then we go through and handle that ourselves. It's not a big automated process where we send some info to some distributor. We're just doing it ourselves.
So the other projects you're building, I know we're not getting into the code of all of that, but is there anything you learned from this that you're going to apply to your next project, or that you're already applying, or that you might
Mhm.
change, or any big takeaways?
Yeah, 100%. I think a big thing that we've sort of learned here is I very much think that the future big projects I'm going to build, it's 100% going to, I think I'm going to stay in the SvelteKit world for most of my front ends. One of the biggest projects we've done is Insider Viz, and we're currently working on rebuilding this entire site. If you go to the actual URL right now, you're going to see a big Next.js pages directory site, which works just fine. We have a lot of backend problems and old data model things that just came from building this when we didn't have all the questions really answered yet. But when we go through and we rebuild this site, we're going to do it with SvelteKit for sure. Because this sort of pattern here that we were able to do within the e-commerce site, where I go to my I go to my products page here, I fire my load function, fetches all my products from the database. We're able to serve them down here with a Svelte component, and I really like the way the Svelte components work. That's going to be an awesome system here for this actual site. When you go to the top companies page, it's going to be great just having a load function up there. We're going to fetch all our top companies, come down here and serve out all that data. It's going to be a really great experience.
It
Awesome.
seems like an actually really cool site.
Yeah.
This is the best site I think we've built so far. And another thing, which is a little unrelated, but like these big custom graphs we built, these are all written in D3. I'm very much looking forward to rebuilding this in SvelteKit because React has the virtual DOM, which is normally not a problem when you're just building normal apps. But when you're dealing with D3, the virtual DOM is not fun. So getting rid of that in SvelteKit is going to make this whole thing so much better.
Yeah. I mean, it's really pretty the way it is, but I love the idea of being able to make it more of what you want it to
Mhm.
be.
Oh, yeah.
That's, yeah, this is cool. This is really cool. So overall, one thing that I did want to ask you about, and I think Jen, you touched upon it a little bit, but when you were approaching the project,
Mhm.
any major roadblocks that you found, like with any of the technologies that, like particularly like with Cloudinary, with TypeScript, all the things that you're bringing in there, was there anything like, hey, if you as a developer that's following this along and saying, I want to do a project similar to what Ben did,
Mhm.
is there anything you're saying like, watch out for this or don't do this the same way I did this the first time?
Yeah, I think, well, let me see. I think really probably one of the biggest sort of hurdles in this was the initial setup. Now that this whole environment is set up and working, the ORM is in there, the database is in there, the authentication is set up. Now that it's all there, it's really great and easy to use. But there was definitely a sort of learning curve there where it's like, okay, getting authentication set up and implemented the first time, making sure that works with the database. There was a lot of initial setup. The start was really the hardest part. Once we
Okay.
got past the start, it got way easier. But there is just, when you're using a lot of these technologies and bringing them all together, it's kind of tricky to just figure out how all this stuff fits together. And I think that was probably that took the longest time throughout this whole project.
Well, and tell me if I'm wrong about this, but like I would say now that you have all of your code open source, it's all
Mhm.
available, like you have repo, you've kind of taken all of that groundwork away from having to do that. So it's like you have this nice little starter kit that you've created.
Yeah.
The future developers say, if you want to do this with Spell, I did all the hard work and
Mhm.
blood, sweat, and tears, and all that fun stuff. And then you can go ahead and just implement this yourself and just make it what you need it to be by just forking my repo.
Yeah, exactly, and that is exactly right. A great example of this is, here, give me 1 second, I can pull it up. This is actually a pretty good example. Okay, cool. So, what I sort of wanted to give as an example, just like what you were saying, using it as like a starter kit,
Mhm.
uh, over the last couple of days, I've been going through and getting the, kind of foundations laid for this new version of Insider Viz we're building. Because like I said, we have a brand new data source. We're gonna have by far the best SEC Form 4 data set on the market, and we need to go through and actually build out this site. And instead of having to go through and spend hours figuring out the authentication, the data model, how all this stuff is gonna work together, I just went through and I used the code from the e-commerce site and I just copy pasted tons of it over to this project to where within like basically an hour, I was able to have all of these pages set up and ready. I was able to get my login working. I can sign in with GitHub and it just works immediately. I was able to, so you can go here, you get the profile, you get your user working. All this stuff was prepped and ready, and I didn't have to go through and do that initial setup again. And now we can just focus on the actual important part, which is making a good site.
That's cool. That's cool. And the thing that I love about the developer community in general is this, being able to say, I'm going to create something, but I'm going to give back and make it easier for you to be able to do this. And people can reiterate. It's never plagiarism. It's where they can just take and lift and work. And it's fantastic. So Ben, that's the cool thing about this. And frankly, this is the reason why I am happy that you didn't go ahead and build like a Shopify site, because once again, now you've developed a e-commerce template that others can use, and using a lot of cool technologies, including Svelte, Cloudinary, all the things that you mentioned before.
100%.
I mean, it's more work, obviously, what you did. The easier thing to do would be to just go with something that's already built. But the benefits that you guys got to have by building your own is that you could customize everything the way that you wanted. So it gives you power. It just takes more work.
Yeah.
One more question that I had for you is, have you ever thought about including video in the Sediment site or any other e-commerce sites that you're thinking about building?
Oh, yes, 100%. At some point, probably here, we're going to go through and I've been talking to the guys who I'm working on this with. We're going to go through and I think we're going to completely refresh the homepage and change a bunch of stuff, get fresh marketing copy, all that stuff. And definitely something we want to include is going to be videos. So having a video there that breaks down the process of, okay, how do these images come about? How does all this stuff work is going to be super important. And we're going to 100% embed those into the site.
That's awesome. Yeah, I don't know the date off the top of my head, but now people are interested in seeing video, especially for clothing. But even I'm just thinking like a 3D model where you could see like, well, how does this hang on the wall? What did they do in the back of that photo? Is there wood back there? Is there a wire? What does that look like? And things like that are really making a difference. So glad to have talked to you and see this really great use case that uses Cloudinary and all of the other technologies that we've talked about today.
Absolutely.
Hopefully, when you bring video into it, hopefully you're using Cloudinary for that, and we can bring it or two, be able to say like, hey, so how did that all work in this case?
Yep.
And speaking of which, one thing I do want to ask you about before we end the program is I know that you have a large YouTube presence and you have lots of videos that you're putting out, being able to talk about your software development journey and things that you're learning along the way. How do people find all the places you are and talking about these topics?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best place to find me is 100% just my YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/@bmdavis419. I'm sure it'll be linked down below on this. And that's kind of the core of what I'm doing in the online world. I'm also on Twitter, now X, working on building a bunch of different projects, working on Insider Viz, working on Block, working on Sediment. And I just made a Notion page here, which has all of the videos and stacks and resources for this project linked. I have the links to the deep dives on Stripe, so I go deep into like how I did it, diagram out how all that works. Same thing with authentication and the database and the images and the stack. And then I did these are like not nearly as much of tutorials, but kind of just like long 30-minute videos where I just kind of go through and implement some stuff. You can see what that looks like in real time. And that's probably one of the best places to get more information on how to build something like this yourself.
Love this. Oh my gosh, there's so much goodness in this project, Ben. This is wonderful.
Yes.
Keep it up. Keep it up. Absolutely. And of course, we'll send all the people your way to keep track of all the great things you're doing, because this is not going to be the last thing. I know this is not the last thing based on the sheer workforce that's put behind these projects.
I hope so.
Absolutely. So, Jen, one thing I got to ask you about. What's your big takeaway for this one?
So many. This episode really packed a punch, and Ben is such a great speaker, so concise and clear. I think just really the fact that he was able to make this custom website work the way that he wanted and have it look the way he wanted. I think that's just, it's a little brave, but I really recommend it. I think it looks beautiful, and all even these small details that we didn't even know about, like the gradient in the title of the product and things like that. That's not going to come out of the box with a lot of these fully baked products that you can use. So yeah, I just think it's awesome what Ben was doing, and this episode really packs a punch for sure.
It
How about you?
absolutely is. Well, I gotta tell you, it makes me really proud that our Cloudinary community is making such helpful SDKs. Like, I just
Serious.
looking at this and I'm like, oh gosh, the work that Matthias has done on his Svelte SDK, and then the contributors that are part of that, and just seeing that Ben took this SDK and brought it to life and used it in such an amazing, simple way. It's so it is to say that kind of what I was pointing out a little bit earlier with just, I love the developer community for so many reasons because I can share and collaborate and work together on things. But if it wasn't for this effort, then project like this maybe wouldn't even have happened as seamlessly as they had. So this takes a village, and I'm really glad some of the village is on the side of great images, great videos, like the way we have here at Cloudinary. So this is very, very cool.
Yeah. And this episode wouldn't have happened if Ben's previous company didn't use Cloudinary. So sometimes I'm interested to know, how do people find out about Cloudinary? And we hear so many different answers, but you only know what you know. And he found out about it at his last company. He liked it. And, there you go. The rest is history. So excited to see what Ben builds next, because we know he's busy. We know his team is busy. His group of friends is busy. Really, really cool stuff.
Totally. So a couple things that we do want to point out here. So I'm going to pop my screen real fast. So the SDK that everything we walked through today, which with Ben's project, what was used, the Svelte SDK, that's going to be at github.com. If you just go to the Cloudinary community main organization there, you're going to be able to see the Svelte Cloudinary SDK right there. As we showed a little bit earlier, we have a site that's all devoted towards the various types of components, the helpers, everything that you need there. It's going to be at svelte.cloudinary.dev. But the other thing I do want to point out is that Cloudinary org that we have for community SDKs, it's pretty extensive. So if you're looking at some of the work that's been done for Next or the Netlify plugin that our Colby Fayok over on the developer experience team has developed, all of those various repos happen to be there too. So definitely take the chance to dive into a lot of those various details. And of course, as mentioned earlier, make sure to spend the time really unpackaging what Ben has developed inside of his repository. You can simply just go to his account, which is going to be bmdavis419, and then check everything out at SvelteKit-e-commerce. So make sure to check all of that out. And of course, the live site is at SedimentArt.com. On top of all of this, remember, we have lots of podcast episodes. So if you're like, I want to listen to more, great. If you want to watch more, great. We are out on Spotify. We're out on YouTube. We're out on Apple Podcasts, wherever you like to listen and watch the various podcast content that you're consuming. We're likely there. So make sure to check it out. And of course, a main library is going to be available at cloudinary.com/podcasts. On top of this, we even host all of these inside of our own training academy, which is at training.cloudinary.com. And keep in touch. The way that you can do that is talking with users like Ben and millions of other developers that are using Cloudinary at community.cloudinary.com. On behalf of everybody at Cloudinary, thank you for being a part of this DevJams episode. And we can't wait to see what you and other developers do. So make sure you're telling us all about those, because we love to highlight the innovative, inspiring, interesting projects that you and our developer community are building with Cloudinary for image management and image delivery, as well as video management and video delivery. See you soon. We'll see you at the next one.